Our second Shattuck Prize winner today is Adam Kirsch. Adam Kirsch is an American poet and literary critic. He is an editor at the New Republic and a columnist for the Tablet magazine. He writes regularly for The New Yorker, The Times Literary Supplement, and other magazines. Kirsch is a contributing editor to Harvard Magazine and a 1997 graduate of Harvard College. He is the author of several books of poetry, most recently Invasions. He is also the author of The Wounded Surgeon, Confession and Transformation in 6 American Poets, 2005, and The Modern Element, Essays on Contemporary Poetry, in 2008. Please join me in congratulating Adam.
I'm honored to be with Marcela receiving this first annual Roger Shattuck Award, and especially because there's no better flag for a critic, especially one like me who's mainly outside the Academy, to sail under. I never met him, but when I had my first job at the New Republic, he was someone who was often talked about with affection and great respect. And after hearing this good news, I went back to some of his books, in particular Candor and Perversion, and I was looking at the 19 theses that Morris Dickstein mentioned earlier, these theses in defense of humane literary values that Shattuck read at a conference in 1994. It made me think, reading that essay and many of the essays in that book, how lucky I was sort of to be too late for a lot of those ideological wars. Starting my career as a writer in the late 1990s, and as a college student in the mid-90s in a department that was, in the best sense of the word, traditional, and had very little theory or battles about theory in it. I think that a lot of the anger, a lot of the ire of that period has dissipated, and talking to someone recently, we were talking about the late 80s and the early 90s, and this person said the good guys won in the end. And I think that that's true, although maybe it's partly because there was a truce declared and we don't remember how much was ceded in that truce. But in another sense, I think the struggle between the ideals of criticism and the Academy is something that's cyclical. It takes different forms. It took the one form in that period, but it has taken other forms throughout history, and I was reminded reading Shattuck's essays of the essay by Alan Tate called Miss Emily and the Bibliographers, in which he talks about the Faulkner story about a character, Miss Emily, who kills her lover and keeps her body in the bathtub. And that was Tate's metaphor for the way literary scholars of his time treated literature, that they killed it to keep it in the bathtub. That was in the 1940s, and the rise of the new critics, who we heard so much about in the last panel, displaced that older school of literary scholarship. Then the rise of theory displaced the new critics. Now maybe we're after the period of theory as well. But what remains the same, I think, is that there's a basic tension between the virtues of scholarship and pedagogy, which are, of course, important virtues and genuine vocations, and the vocation of criticism, which is different and maybe in some ways ill at ease with those other two, with scholarship and pedagogy. I think that in thinking about some of the issues that were discussed today, there's been a lot of concern about the question of authority. I think that that's sort of the running theme today, is what has happened to critical authority and what will happen to it. And the answer to that, as I've come to think about it over the course of writing my own criticism, is that the correction of taste is not a viable standard simply because taste is never corrected. I know I've written things where I thought I was going to correct someone for good and that would put an end to them. But it doesn't happen, and people who I think, or I've thought, don't deserve acclaim, no matter how much you try to correct the public, and they continue to be more and more acclaimed, or vice versa, people who are neglected. So the correction of taste, I think, is an elusive standard, and another concept that T.S. Eliot wrote about in another one of these long-running debates involving Eliot was whether criticism is autotelic, as he said, meaning whether it is an end in and of itself or only a means to the end of elucidating and producing creative literature. And I think that the answer is that it is autotelic, that criticism is an end in and of itself, and that critics write about human experience and write about life and the world just as other writers do, except that they do it in the form of writing about texts instead of writing about characters or writing stanzas. That means it's a specialized form and it's referring to something other than itself, but its purpose, its telos, as Eliot has it, is in itself, and that's why it doesn't so much matter, I think, in the end, where the critical authority resides or popularity, because the work of the critic will have to stand and fall on its own literary terms, which are essentially human terms. And again, coming back to Roger Shattuck's work, there's no better example. Someone whose books continue to be read, not only for what they say about their subjects, but also for the way they reveal their author. And some of the critics we heard here today are people who I feel I know as well as I know many creative writers, simply from reading their criticism, learning about their sensibility and their view of the world. I think that's a good aspiration for a critic to have, and having a recognition like this helps to make it seem more possible. So I thank the Shattuck family very much and the Center for Fiction. Thank you.